Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today, once again, we are looking at one of those examples of how it seems like abortion facilities absolutely are so focused on just getting rid of that fetus that they totally lose interest in the mother once the abortion's over. 18-year-old Sylvia Moore underwent a safe and legal abortion at the hands of 50-year-old Arnold Bickham on December 31st of 1986 at his urgent medical care clinic in Chicago. She was in the second trimester of her pregnancy, but Bickham used a suction procedure only appropriate for first trimester. After the abortion, Bickham gave Sylvia repeated injections of Demerol because she was reporting severe abdominal cramps. Now, according to her mother, Sylvia was bleeding, weak, incoherent, and unable to walk after spending 5 hours at the clinic. Bickham had tried several times to lift Sylvia to her feet, but she repeatedly collapsed. Bickham called her lazy, put her in a wheelchair, and physically ejected her from his clinic. Sylvia's mother promptly took her to Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center, where staff tried in vain to save her. She had arrived with no pulse or blood pressure. An emergency hysterectomy was done to remove her lacerated uterus, which still had a plastic instrument embedded in a 6.5 centimeter laceration. Sylvia also had a 2.2 centimeter laceration in her vagina. Despite the surgery, she bled to death. Bickham claimed that he didn't think there was anything wrong with Sylvia and said that he'd merely been helping her with the wheelchair. He couldn't explain why he didn't think there was anything wrong with a patient who was so weak that she couldn't walk out to the car. Then he blamed Sylvia's death on the hospital, saying, "They were successful in repairing the damage done in the abortion, but in doing that, they perforated an artery, causing there to be blood loss in the chest cavity." Actually, there was no evidence of that. The autopsy report noted that she did have a chest tube incision, but her lungs were well expanded and the lung cavities were free of fluid and adhesions. An attorney with the Department of Professional Regulation said, "This patient should never have been allowed to leave Bickham's clinic with her mother. She should have left in an ambulance." The post-mortem report said the circumstances of injury, review of the medical records, the findings at autopsy examination, and subsequent investigation of the circumstances of the case provide evidence of gross negligence and abandonment on the part of the original treating physician. In consideration of above, the manner of death is determined to be homicide. But no charges were ever pressed against Bickham. His attorney claimed that he was being picked on as a racist witch hunt. "He's a black man who did an abortion and he's an ex-felon." That's strike 1, 2, and 3. Somehow they're ignoring the fact that Sylvia was black. Now, the suit by Sylvia's survivors noted that Bickham had failed to perform an ultrasound, failed to have adequate staff or equipment, and the specimen of abortion tissue sent from the clinic contained segments of placental tissue, umbilical cord, fetal intestinal parts, and liver. Sylvia left one child motherless. Now, Bickham's license was revoked by Illinois in October of 1988 because of Sylvia's death. The medical board had concluded that Bickham had performed the abortion without adequate support staff and emergency equipment and failed to recognize symptoms of abdominal bleeding. He was arrested in September of 1989 for practicing medicine without a license. Nothing to do with this death that had been ruled a homicide. He was sentenced to 30 months probation and 2,600 hours of community service in lieu of 6 months jail time. And Sylvia's mother, of course, found this far too lenient. Now, Bickham had been a prolific abortionist. In 1974, he'd been the highest paid doctor in the country's Medicaid program, with total reimbursements worth over $4 million in current bills. His medical license had been put on probation in 1979 after he'd been caught performing abortions on women who were not actually pregnant. And that same year, he was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for defrauding the government out of job training funds. Now, fortunately, Bickham did eventually hang up his cannula. On the downside, he became a public school administrator, still in a position where his poor judgment might harm, but at least not kill, any more children or young women. So again, this is an example of once the fetus is dead, they have this sense that the woman is no longer their problem.